Hello girls and boys, all our little legends, and welcome to today's story time. And today's story is called A Bad Case of Stripes, and it's by David Shannon. And we can see by the cover exactly why it's called that. She is so covered in little stripes, the little girl. So will we find out why? We turn the page and find out why. Okay, are you all sitting nice and comfortable? Okay. Camilla loved lima beans, but she never ate them. All of her friends hated lima beans, and she wanted to fit in. Camilla was always worried about what other people thought of her. Today she was fretting even more than usual. It was the first day of school, and she couldn't decide what to wear. There were so many people to impress. She tried on 42 outfits, but none seemed quite right. She put on a pretty red dress and looked in the mirror. Then she screamed. Look at all the lovely outfits behind her, girls and boys. They all look lovely. I don't think any of them would make you scream if you looked in the mirror, do you? Her mother ran into the room, and she screamed too. "Oh my heavens," she cried, "you're completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe. She looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camilla answered, "but just look at me." "You get back in bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You're not going to school today." Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say, and she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. So all she's worried about, girls and boys, is what she's going to put on to go along with them. Imagine, just worried about what she's going to wear. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. "Most extraordinary," he exclaimed. "I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughs, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camilla told him. "I feel fine." "Well then," Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, "I don't see any reason why she shouldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to find me." And off he went. And there's Dr. Bumble examining Camilla. She's to stick her tongue out, and even her tongue has got stripes, girls and boys. A stripy tongue. And what does Dr. Bumble give her? He gives her ointment, doesn't he? I don't think the ointment's work, girls and boys, do you? No. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla. They called her Camilla Crane and Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything was normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. And there you can see her, girls and boys, all the things that are in the flag, girls and boys, the stripes and the stars. And some of the girls and boys have noticed, haven't they? And look at their faces. Would you make that face too? If you saw her, girls and boys, would you go, "Oh"? Can you make that face now? See if you can do that. Oh. Yeah, because it would be very strange to see, wouldn't it, girls and boys? Camilla with her stars and stripes. The other kids thought this was great. One yelled out, "Let's see some purple polka dots." Sure enough, Camilla turned all purple polka dotty. Someone else shouted, "Checkerboard!" and a pattern of checks and squares covered her skin. Soon everyone was calling out different shapes and colours, and poor Camilla was changing faster than you could change the channels on your TV. Look at her, girls and boys. Can you point to where the stars and stripes are still there? Point at the picture. Yes, you're right. And then can you point then to where the checkers are? Checks are squares. Yeah, that's right. Well done. And then can you point to where, do you remember somebody wanted it to go all polka dotty, all purple? There it is up there, girls and boys. Oh, they're not being very nice. Sure they're not. Poor Camilla. That night, Mr. Herms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's just too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from the other parents. They're afraid those stripes are contagious." Camilla was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago everyone liked her. Now nobody wanted to be in the same room as her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," sighed Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she'd been laughed at enough for one day. So there's Mummy and Daddy, girls and boys, and they're very worried about her, aren't they? Very worried, because even the principal doesn't want her to come into school. Poor Camilla. Poor Camilla. Well, yes, I see, Dr. Bumble mumbled when Mr. Cream phoned the next day. "I think I'd better bring in the specialists. They'll be right over." About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats. He introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Grop, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young." Then the specialists went to work on Camilla. They squeezed and jabbed, tapped and tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Group. "Or the measles," said Dr. Sponge. "Definitely not chickenpox," put in Dr. Cricket. "Or sunburn," said Dr. Young. "Try these," said the specialist. They each handed her a bottle filled with different coloured pills. "Take one of each before bed," said Dr. Group. Now they filed out of the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. And there they are, girls and boys. And look, he's going to test. He has the hammer, and he's going to test her knee. And look, he's looking in her eyes. Oh, it must be very uncomfortable, girls and boys. And she's getting her blood pressure taken. Very uncomfortable indeed, boys and girls. Definitely very uncomfortable. I hope they make her better. I hope, what did they give her? They gave her a bottle with some pills in, didn't they? And they're all different colours, so I hope they make her better. Let's see. That night, Camilla took her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant, multicoloured pill with her face on it. And even her little bow is still there, girls and boys. But she is just a big pill, girls and boys. Poor Camilla. Poor Camilla. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called. But this time, instead of the specialists, he brought the experts. Dr. Grood and Mr. Mill were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again Camilla was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to. The experts wrote down lots of numbers. Then they huddled together and whispered. Dr. Grood finally spoke. "It must be a virus," he announced with authority. Suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camilla. "Or possibly some form of bacteria," said Mr. Mill. Out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. "Or it could be a fungus," added Dr. Grood. Instantly, Camilla was covered with different coloured fungus blotches. The experts looked at Camilla, then at each other. "We need to go over these numbers again, back at the lab," said Dr. Grood. "We'll call you when we know something." But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. So what did it say that all came out on our girls and boys? The bacteria was one, yes. What's the other one? You're right, the fungus. And look at all the things that popped out because of it, girls and boys. And what was the last one again? That's right, the virus. Poor Camilla. Look at the many things that have popped all out. Poor Camilla. And so they didn't even have a clue, girls and boys. So, let alone a cure. Poor little Camilla. Today, girls and boys. Poor little Camilla. By now the TV news had found out about Camilla. Reporters from every channel were outside her house, telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon a huge crowd was camped outside in front of the lawn. So there they are, all our girls and boys. How many of the camera crew are there? Some are right up at the door there, right up at the house. The rest of them had sat down on the lawn. But so many of them, all there. And what did they call it, girls and boys? The bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Poor Camilla. Poor Camilla. There she is, girls, sitting watching it all being reported on the TV. The creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionalists, psychics, and an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance, until it was hard to even recognise her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail. But nothing worked. So girls and boys, there she is, sitting, as I said, watching all that's going on about her on the TV. And can you call out some of the things if I point to them? What did it say this was sprouting from poor Camilla? That's right, the feather. And then, what would you say that is there, girls and boys? Here. The crystals, that's right, And we can still see her little bow, so we know that it's Camilla, her little bow. And some more feathers, that's right. And then, what did it say this was? Call out. Yeah, a big furry tail. Poor Camilla. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed she could cure Camilla. Close your eyes, she said, breathe deeply, and become one with your room. I wish you hadn't said that, said Camilla. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth, her nose was a dresser, and two paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran from the room. "What are we going to do?" cried Mrs. Cream. "It just keeps getting worse and worse." And she began to sob. So, girls and boys, what did it say that Camilla's bed was? And you can see the shape of it there, girls and boys. Call out to me what that became. Her mouth, you're right. And then, what did it say the dresser became? What's that? That's right, her nose. And then you can see them up here, girls and boys, either side of my hand. What did the two paintings become? Call out. Her eyes, that's right. Poor Camilla, girls and boys. It even made her mommy sob. What is going to happen? Poor Camilla, girls and boys. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the front door. He opened it, and there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. "Excuse me," she said brightly, "but I think I can help." So there she is, girls and boys. And she does look really helpful, doesn't she? She looks as if she can really, really help. Will we see if she does? Will we see if she can help poor Camilla? She went into Camilla's room and looked around. "My goodness," she said with a shake of her head, "what we have here is a bad case of stripes. One of the worst I've ever seen." She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. "Here," she said, "these might do the trick." "Are those magic beans?" asked Mrs. Cream. "Oh no," replied the kind old woman. "There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I'll bet you'd like some, wouldn't you?" she asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big heaping plateful of lima beans, more than just about anything, but she was still afraid to admit it. "Yuck," she said. "No one likes lima beans, especially me." "Oh dear," the old woman said sadly. "I guess I was wrong about you." She put the beans back in her bag and started towards the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she'd been going through. She finally couldn't stand it. "Wait!" she cried. "The truth is, I really love lima beans." "I thought so," the old woman said with a smile. She took a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. "Mmm," said Camilla. So there's the little old lady, girls and boys, and she's helping Camilla by putting the beans into her mouth, because Camilla just couldn't say no any longer, girls and boys, because she really likes lima beans, but she didn't want to admit it. Sure she didn't. But now she says, no, it can't be any worse than the way things are, and she may as well feel better by taking her little lima beans. And what is going to happen? Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. Then the whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla. And everything was back to normal. "I'm cured!" she shouted. "Yes," said the old woman, I knew the real you was in there somewhere. She patted Camilla on the head. Then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. And there is Camilla, and she is just looking back to her little self again, girls and boys. No stripes, because she admitted what she liked. She wasn't trying to be somebody else. She just admitted what she liked herself. Afterward, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said she was weird, but she didn't care a bit. She ate all the lima beans she wanted, and she never had even a touch of stripes again, girls and boys. So from then on, she just was herself. She didn't worry what people thought. She just did what she wanted herself, what she liked herself, girls and boys. She didn't put on a front to impress anybody, because it's always nice to be yourself, girls and boys, isn't it? It's always nice just to be yourself. If you like something, there's no reason why you shouldn't say you like it, girls and boys, by just being yourself. And Camilla certainly was. And look at all that big plate of lima beans. I bet they've never tasted so good, girls and boys. Like she said, they've never tasted so good. So, all the doctors, the experts, and who were the other ones called? That's right, the specialists. And what did one say it was? A virus, that's right. And what was another one? The bacteria. None of them were right. It was a little old lady who knew, the kind lady who came to the house, who knew it was just that Camilla wasn't being herself. Because it's always nice just to be yourself, girls and boys. And that is Camilla there, back to being herself, girls and boys, compared to a bad case of stripes. So we hope you enjoyed today's really good story, girls and boys. A bad case of stripes about Camilla. And so from today's little legends, girls and boys, hope you're all going to be yourselves until the next time we have a little legend story time. So in the meantime, be yourselves, and it's bye for now.